I was standing in front of my parents' old house, staring at the giant metal sign hammered into the ground that said, Property of Lakeview, HOA. It was like a punch in the gut. My parents' names were carved into that mailbox for 40 years. And now these people, these self-proclaimed community leaders, thought they could just claim it because my folks weren't around to stop them. They said it was promised verbally. Verbal. To an HOA I was never even a part of. And the worst part? They really thought I'd just roll over and let it happen. See, my name's Mark Wilson, and I grew up here in Lakeview, back when it was just farmland and gravel roads. My parents, George and Elaine, bought this land in 1980, back before the HOA even existed. When they passed, I inherited the place legally. Clean paperwork, notarized will, the whole deal. I live 2 towns over now, got my own house. A bigger one, actually. I don't visit much, but when you get a letter in the mail saying your inheritance is about to be sold by people you've never met, well, that tends to get your attention. The letter came in February. It said that after my parents' deaths, the house and property were to be transferred to Lakeview HOA as per verbal agreement. No signature, no contract, just words on paper. Signed by Karen Mitchell, HOA president. Now, if you've ever met a Karen in power, you know the type. Perfect hair, fake smile, and that unshakable belief that the world owes her obedience. I called her up immediately, thinking maybe it was some clerical mix. Up. Nope. She doubled down. Mr. Wilson, she said, in that condescending tone only people like her can master. Your parents agreed the property would become community land once they passed. It's been known for years. Known by who? I shot back. Because it sure as hell wasn't known by me. She didn't even flinch. Well, you're not a resident here, are you? So it's really none of your concern. That line, none of your concern, stuck with me. That's how she saw it. My family's home, my father's workshop, my mother's garden, none of my concern. I hung up before I said something that would get me arrested. At first, I figured it was just Karen being Karen. Maybe a bluff, a scare tactic. But then, a week later, I drove by the property, and there it was, a bright orange violation notice slapped right on the door. Unmaintained property, subject to HOA repossession. Except, here's the thing. I was never part of their HOA. My parents' land predated it by a decade. And there she was, Karen herself, standing in my driveway, arms crossed, supervising 2 men trimming the hedges like they owned the place. "Excuse me," I yelled, walking up. "What do you think you're doing on my property?" She turned, slow as a snake. "We're just maintaining what's soon to be ours. The community can't tolerate neglect." "Neglect?" I laughed bitterly. "You're trespassing. Karen!" Her lips curled. "You can call it whatever you want. But the paperwork is already in motion." I wanted to rip that smug look right off her face. Instead, I told her flat out, "You'll hear from my lawyer." Except, I didn't have one. Not yet. So that night, I sat at my kitchen table, scanning every folder my parents left behind. Deeds, wills, tax receipts, every damn thing. Everything said the same thing. Ownership passed to me. Clean and legal. So I did what any rational person would do. I wrote a letter. A real letter. Certified mail. Demanding they produce written proof of this so-called verbal agreement within 7 days. No proof, no further contact. Days went by. Then 2 weeks. Nothing. Finally, I got a response. A single paragraph saying, "There was a verbal understanding between the deceased and HOA representatives. No written document exists." I just sat there reading it over and over. Verbal understanding. That's not how property works. That's not how law works. But Karen thought she could just talk it into existence, as if her word was enough to rewrite history. I was furious, but underneath that, something else crept in, doubt. What if Dad had said something? He'd been slipping in his last years. And Mom, she was too kind for her own good. Maybe she'd agreed just to keep the peace. I started questioning myself. Was I the one being unreasonable? That thought haunted me for days. I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing their faces, wondering if I was dishonoring their memory by fighting this. But then, one night, I found it, tucked in a manila envelope in the back of a cabinet. The original will, updated in 2010, signed, sealed, witnessed. Every line crystal clear. All property to be transferred to Mark Wilson upon death. No mention of HOA, no community clause, nothing. That was the clarity I needed, so I decided to fight back, on my terms. I called an old friend, Richard Hale, a corporate lawyer I'd known for 20 years. The guy's blunt, zero BS, but he's sharp as a blade. After I told him everything, he just said, "Mark, they're bluffing, but if they're stupid enough to push this, we'll let them hang themselves with their own rope." His plan was genius. We'd invite Karen and her little board to a meeting at the property, make it look like I was willing to sell, and get everything on paper. Once they admitted they had no legal claim, we'd have all the evidence we needed. So I sent the invitation, formal, polite, with a clear meeting time. I even said I'd consider transferring the property if the HOA provided fair compensation. I wanted to see how far their greed would go. On the day of the meeting, the sun was blazing, the grass up to my knees. Richard and I set up a folding table in the yard, laptop, printer, and 2 lawn chairs. At 2:55 sharp, a black SUV rolled up. Out stepped Karen, flanked by 2 board members. One looked like he hadn't smiled since the Reagan era. The other, an orthodontist, judging by his vanity plates. Karen smiled like a wolf. "Glad to see you came to your senses." "Something like that," I said. "Let's get started." We sat down. Richard hit record on his phone, subtly. I began. "So, Karen, before we discuss terms, I'd like to see this verbal agreement in writing." She cleared her throat. "It was an understanding between your father and several past board members. They all recall it." "Oh, so it's hearsay," I said flatly. Her lawyer jumped in, flustered. "Verbal contracts can be binding under certain—" "Not for real estate." Richard cut him off. "That's Property Law 101. The silence was delicious. I leaned forward. "Here's what's going to happen. You want this property? Fine. You can buy it at fair market value." I slid a printed document across the table. $769,500. Karen's eyes widened. "That's absurd." "No," I said calmly. "Absurd is thinking you can steal from a dead man's family." The older board member muttered something about taking it to a vote. Karen looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. She tried to save face, mumbling, "Fine, we'll vote on it." "Good," Richard said, signing the preliminary sale agreement. "You've got until next week. After that, the offer's gone." That meeting was the longest 45 minutes of my life, but it was worth every second. A week later, I heard from a resident friend that the HOA meeting was chaos. Half the board was furious about the price. The other half wanted to sue me instead. Then someone, bless their soul, recorded Karen yelling that she didn't care what the law said because the property was practically ours already. That recording made its way to every homeowner in Lakeview. By the next morning, my phone buzzed. A wire transfer had hit my account. $769,500. Just like that. The deal was sealed, and the HOA had officially purchased the property they thought they already owned. They couldn't back out now without committing fraud. For me, the money was just a number. What mattered was that Karen had been forced to kneel under her own arrogance. A month later, the state opened an investigation into Lakeview HOA. Turns out, mine wasn't the only verbal agreement they'd claimed over the years. 2 other families came forward. Karen resigned before she could be removed. Citing health reasons, her lawyer's license was suspended for professional misconduct. When I drove back to the old property one last time, the sign that once claimed property of HOA was gone. All that remained was the hole where it had been. The earth filled back in, uneven and scarred, just like what they'd tried to do to my family's name. I didn't smile, I didn't cheer, I just stood there, hands in my pockets, feeling the quiet. Sometimes justice doesn't come with applause. It just settles in, heavy and still, like the air after a storm. When the only thing left standing is the truth. And that's the lesson I learned. When someone tries to take what's yours, the law isn't just protection. It's a weapon, if you know how to use it.